Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Kidney Coach podcast. I am naturopathic Dr. Fiona Chin, co-founder of the Kidney Disease Solution and formulator at Genesis, our supplement range. And I'm joined again today by the fabulous Lindsey Zirker, who joins us from the Kidney Nutritional Institute. Lindsey is a renal dietitian, and she's a bit like me. She nerds out on all the really cool stuff and loves digging into great big files and research studies, and we get off on big long stuff and rabbit holes, and it's great. So Lindsey, I really appreciate you being here and nerding out with me, and we've got such a cool topic today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me back, Fiona.
Oh no, I love you and your brain. It's just can't get enough. I want to So for everyone watching today, Lindsey's got a great topic for us to talk about, and it's a nice controversial one, but I'm going to hand it across to Lindsey to talk about. We're going to talk about saturated fats and do you need them? Do they contribute to cardiovascular disease? If you're on a plant-based diet for kidney disease, what are we doing with fats? Where do we get them from? Are they that evil? Are plant-based fats a good enough source or not? And that's my introduction, Lindsey. So I'm going to hand it across to you. I'll interject if I need to, but why don't you start us with saturated fats, fatty acids, all things fat. Why do we need them? Why are they important in the diet? And why should we not take them out?
Yes. So there has been a lot of controversy with fats over the decades, and we don't even have to dig into that because everybody already knows it. They already have heard all the messaging. And saturated fats and fats in general, they're really important to help us have healthy hair and skin and hormone balance. And a really big one for kidney disease is to help reduce inflammation. Various types of fats really are important for that. But a lot of times there's just so much confusion about, including them or how much or, what type is good, what kind is bad. And just like I was telling you before we hopped on, I was looking at a review article that was published just last September. It's called Saturated Fat, Villain and Boogeyman in the Development of Cardiovascular Disease. And their conclusion was pretty strong after they did this meta-analysis and review of a bunch of different studies. And they said that, the saturated fatty acids cannot be demonized anymore. They specifically said there's no scientific ground for this to demonize saturated fatty acids as a cause of cardiovascular disease. And that saturated fatty acids in nutrient-dense foods can be part of a healthy quality diet, which will promote cardiovascular health.
Yay!
I know, so refreshing, right? And I think that, and I think that the key too is in nutrient-dense foods. As it really seems to be in this whole Western diet thing where fat gets demonized or sodium or sugar or any of these things, that a lot of times it's really the lack of nutrient density that these, nutrients are consumed in. And then that just brings out, the evil twin of those nutrients. It just brings out their bad side. But when you eat these different foods with nutrient dense foods, then you get the benefits of it.
100% agree. And I'm going to digress here for a sec. I can't wait till the study comes out to talk about that high cholesterol isn't always a big issue because it's the size.
Yes.
That's the next one we can nerd out on, but I digress. But so go dig into me for me. And you covered it briefly, but let's get into detail of why do people need fats in their diet? How do fats work in the body? Why are they important if you've got something like chronic kidney disease or even cardiovascular health? Why should we maybe not so quick to take them out?
Yes. So fats play a really important role in providing fuel for our body. That's one of the big things when we started doing low protein diets or very low protein diets with our CKD clients. That was one of the things that we noticed really quickly, that when people did low fat along with this diet, they did not do well. And research has since come out saying that if you're doing a low protein diet or a very low protein diet, then you will not have good outcomes. Like that's actually one of the risk factors for malnutrition and muscle wasting and all these things, because that fat provides fuel so that your body can use that for fuel instead of protein for fuel. And then it can use the protein for all the protein specific things it needs. So that's one of the really important pieces that it plays. Another important role is that fat helps you feel full and satisfied. And who is going to stick with a diet where you're hungry and unsatisfied all the time? Like nobody wants to do that. And it doesn't really matter how motivated you are. You're just going to be like those people who are thinking all they can eat is iceberg lettuce and saltine crackers, and they're just like, I am never full or satisfied. And so fat's really important for that. It's also important for healing tissue, like in your gut specifically, really low fat diets, people have a hard time healing their gut. Partly, I think, because of that anti-inflammatory pathway, hormone balance, and also skin, which is another issue that people who have kidney disease, they seem to have a lot of skin issues because, right, as the body is trying to get rid of those toxins and the kidney can't do it, then other filtering organs are going to try and take over, and the skin is one of those. And if you are eating too low of fat in your diet, then you are going to just exacerbate that. We also have to have fat to absorb nutrients too. There's a lot of different nutrients that need to be absorbed in the presence of fat, and not just that's like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, all those ones, but also different benefits that a lot of probably our viewers have looked at, things like curcumin, that is hugely anti-inflammatory, but in just by itself, it's not very well absorbed. And so we know that like black pepper and fat are things that really help your body absorb that better and help it be lots more beneficial.
Yeah. And talk to me about hormones, because one of the things, so for MS, one of the diets is this swank diet, and it's very low in saturated fat. And it was one of the first diets when I was diagnosed that I tried. But what happened was menstrual cycle stopped, dry skin, my hair was awful. And then what I've seen a lot of patients that come to me now with MS that are on that diet, severely depressed and anxious. So we know fats play such an important role in hormones. Maybe just dive into that a little bit, because I don't think people realize that's also where it's really important.
Oh yeah. So the fat specifically, like your body has a lot of ways of generating different hormones, but fat helps make those steroid hormones, like the sex hormones of estrogen and testosterone, which are going to drive a lot of things in the body. And so when you are having a low fat diet, you're not going to be producing those hormones at the right levels. And also like cortisol and things like that, they're going to, be thrown off by that. And so we definitely want to make sure we're not, limiting our body's ability to balance things for us. Because, the hormones, they're always going to be bossy. And if we let them, they're just going to run ragged over us if we don't give them the right things that they need.
So true. And one last thing on fats. We spoke briefly about its anti-inflammatory role, but talk to me about actually why they are important in cardiovascular disease and in kidney disease. Why, people are like, well, the anti-inflammatory, is that important if I take them out? Why is taking them out in something like chronic kidney disease an issue?
Yeah. So where a lot of times people are going to be hearing about that anti-inflammatory benefit from omega-3s. That is going to be one of the pathways that the body helps to reduce inflammation. And that is the same thing that happens with cardiovascular disease. But the problem can come if you are also not eating antioxidants as well. I feel like that's why a lot of the studies, they're like, oh, like omega-3 supplements, they don't improve heart health. But if you eat a diet that's high in omega-3s, then you do see the benefits. And that's because these fats can get oxidized as they are doing their anti-inflammatory activities. And if they aren't able to kind of be rescued by these antioxidants, it's just kind of like putting fuel on the fire and creating extra inflammation. And so I think that having the fats in a diet form, and maybe, supplementing if you need to, but also making sure you're getting those extra antioxidants so that they can all work together in reducing inflammation, that's going to support the heart health, which we know really is the significant issue with kidney disease. That's why people have, that's your increased risk of death and mortality there. It's from the poor heart health, and that's where the omega-3s really shine, because they're going to keep the vasculature healthy, keep plaques and stuff from building up in there, so your circulation stays good, you get oxygenated. The omega-3s help with that so much. Is there anything else you want me to touch on with that?
No, I was just going to mention the endothelial health of the blood vessels obviously inside the kidneys. We know that that's one of the things, endothelial health and membrane health inside the kidneys, to make sure the kidneys are properly oxygenated, they're getting enough blood flow in there, all of that sort of stuff. We know that when you get fibrosis in the kidneys, the endothelial function is diminished, and it changes as part of the whole process of a decreased EGFR and fibrosis. So anti-inflammatory foods such as omega-3s and stuff help prevent all of that, and are anti-fibrotic inside the kidneys. So super important for that healing pathway as well. Like you say, turmeric's great, but you can't absorb it if you don't have fat, right? So
yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because a lot of times people, they don't necessarily know what caused their kidney problems. Or maybe they're doing a lot of things right, but they're still not really seeing a stabilization of their kidney function or an improvement. And that's one of those root issues that, regardless of whether it was diabetes or heart disease or some weird thing, those are still the activities going on in the kidney. And so this is nice because it's really addressing that root piece to improve from the root.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So talk to me. So when you're putting on someone on a plant-based diet, how are you mitigating all the animal products coming out? Because we know good, well-fed pasture animals are actually very nutrient dense in omega-3s, which is, again, a lot of people don't know that. They just think, meat's full of bad fats, but actually pasture-raised meat is actually high in omegas. So people are losing a lot of that out of their diet. So how are you replacing it? And then talk to me about the problems of plant, because people think, well, I'll just eat a whole pile of flax seeds and chia seeds, and that will give me my omega-3s. But you and I know that may actually not help either, that you actually might need it in an animal source, or if it is a vegan source, a certain type. So walk me through that.
Yes. That was, again, a learning curve for us, as we're seeing lots of people kind of go through this process, and some people responding really well, some people not so much, and other people just feeling terrible. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the ones that we definitely picked up on was, what's going on with the omega-3s, and people who have dug into that, about how the body can convert some types of fatty acids to others. So ALA can be converted to the different omega-3s, but that's what I was taught in school, which granted was a while ago. And so initially that's kind of what we were doing, is just let's just make sure they're getting enough fat. But people weren't responding really well. Their symptoms weren't going away. And then when we had a chance to do some more in-depth nutrient testing, like from NutriEval, where it looks at the different antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, and then also it looks at their actual, fatty acid status, we're just okay, this is a problem. And some other recent studies that came out, they just said, when we looked at it and gave people plenty of flaxseed and their ALA levels looked great, but it did not boost up their omega-3 levels at all. And that is really common for people on fully plant-based diets to just have really low omega-3 levels. And I just feel like that doesn't really work for our CKD people. You have higher needs because of that increased inflammation, that increased cardiovascular risk. And so we did start supplementing with omega-3 for that to try and help. But then for some people, we also just started adding back in some animal proteins because, again, they're so bioavailable with minerals as well. And one of the minerals, too, is zinc, which you have to have zinc and magnesium. And now I'm thinking back, too, I think there's a couple B vitamins involved.
Iron as well. I think it's iron, zinc, magnesium, and three, aren't they, in that part, in the delta 6 desaturase pathway.
Right. Yeah. So you have to have some of these other vitamins and minerals to actually convert the, if there is going to be any conversion going on, you have to have that. And, yes, there are plant products that contain those minerals, but again, they're just not really well absorbed. And so we did start adding back in, some fish, and like you mentioned, the pasture-raised animal products have a very different fatty acid profile, and they include so much more of those beneficial fats. So depending on a person's level of GFR, we added back some of those in, and even sometimes people who their GFR was lower, we would add that in, and then we'd use like Renadil, that probiotic that helps break down those uremic toxins, to kind of help offset some of the extra uremic toxins that would be produced by those animal proteins, or also something like a colostrum supplement, again, to kind of help bind up some of that extra stuff. So we just felt that there's ways to get around that. But if you wanted to stay fully plant-based, even supplement wise, the algae is the way to go. That one actually is going to give you the omega-3s. And so, that's the nice thing about it, is that depending on a person's preferences, their lifestyle, and even like genetic SNPs, if you do that extra testing, that there are multiple ways that you can get those nutrients you need and still support your kidney health. It's not like, to support my kidney health, I got to do a low protein diet. And that also means all these other areas like my hormones and skin and things have to suffer, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And it shouldn't be that way.
No. And it's back to that whole thing that, we speak about all the time, is everyone's an individual, right? What works for one person won't work for another. Some vegetarians, and it is I'm going to say it's a very small percentage, do seem to go okay on flax, but it's not many. And as you mentioned, like, of course, most of our kidney disease patients are anemic, so they don't have iron for the delta 6. They not eating animal meats, and that's, of course, where all your zinc is, and in your seafood and things like that. So they're missing the two main minerals that support that pathway conversion. So it makes sense that they're not converting and doing those sort of things. And it's just one of those tricky balances between maybe you do need a little bit of animal protein, especially if you're stages 1, 2, and maybe even 3. If you're stages 4 and 5, we're going to give you a whole pile of algae or fish oil supplements, and then maybe using a probiotic to help uremic waste and things like that. But that's where working with a professional like yourself or Jess or anyone from the team makes such a difference, because you can tweak that stuff rather than taking a guess and losing half your hair and wondering why you've got eczema everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think a lot of the studies that show the benefit for like the low protein or very low protein diets, they're very short duration. I mean, we're talking like a couple of months, and that's not the reality of the therapy. Like, this is conservative management for kidney disease. These people are hoping to avoid dialysis altogether, or stay off dialysis long enough to get a transplant, or have their kidney function improve so they don't have to do either of those things. And so we're talking about a lifestyle change that, nobody, it seems like, is really thinking long term of what does this look like as a whole for these people? And, what is that like to feel hungry and unsatisfied all the time? Or what is that like for, all these weird skin and hair issues, or really weird hormone balances, which, it's going to impact a lot of things. And I just think, we need to look at the whole person and make sure that we're treating the person as a whole, not just as a set of kidneys.
Yes.
Because, you know, I think that, yeah, we're going to have short-lived positive benefits if we don't take into account these other pieces.
I totally agree. And it's one of you and I share the same pet health about standardized kidney renal diets that people are put on, often low potassium, low animal products. And like you say, the studies are short term. They haven't looked at the long-term impacts. We know now with long-term potassium deficiency, you increase your risk of high blood pressure, which of course is end-stage mortality, right? You're going to put more pressure on the heart. There are no clinical trials, as you were mentioning before, that actually show that potassium food intake has a direct response to serum and blood levels of potassium. And then same with essential fatty acids, right? And saturated fat, we now know it isn't causing cardiovascular disease when eaten maybe in a Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet or something like that, where it's still got really nutrient dense foods and things like that. It's probably not going to be a big issue at all. And in fact, we were saying right before this came on, we're waiting for the studies that come out and prove that even high cholesterol levels aren't actually
Right.
related. It's more whether the cholesterol is oxidized and the size of the particles and all of those sort of things. So I still think science is quite, science has been amazing, but science is also behind what we're starting to see, especially in, clinicians like you that are working with practitioners long-term over years to try and, same with what we're seeing, trying to preserve kidney function and improving EGFR. These short-term diets, which have got some studies on them, which we're now seeing maybe aren't that great, long-term don't work, and actually end up causing issues that you have to go and mop up later, and then you're on the back foot again. So, I find it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely goes back to like how again, things that we've talked about, that it's so much, the focus is so much geared towards preventing complications that they aren't, it's difficult to think long term when, the only information that a lot of providers have been given is to just focus on preventing complications. And that's where that whole traditional renal diet came from is, oh, we see all of these weird nutrient imbalances, so let's just restrict the diet so we don't see that. And that's preventing complications. But, long term, what is that really doing? And like, I looked at that one time and I was like, when we look at what amount of servings in the different food groups are recommended on the renal diet, that looks just like the standard American diet. Like, why why are we giving these people who they really need nutrient dense diets to help combat all they're dealing with? We're just giving them this totally crap diet to follow. Like, no wonder our outcomes are not improving, and no wonder people don't feel well on them. I mean, so many times people would tell me, they're like, I thought that I shouldn't eat like white flour and white rice and all these things. And now they're saying it's too high in potassium and phosphorus, so I can't eat them. I'm like, no, that's old news. Like, we want you to eat nutrient dense foods. And it's just still so pervasive out there. So I'm hoping that, these podcasts, I think, and other providers too, they're recognizing, we've got to get the word out there, because science is a little slow to get, from the research to actual practice. It's decades.
30 years, 30 to 40 years from when. And you just read that scientific article that you're quoting where we can't demonize saturated fats. That was just last year, was it? Or this year, April this year?
Last year in August, yeah.
So potentially 30 years before we see doctors, nephrologists, dietitians being said that actually, what the research says, that saturated fat is not bad. It, in fact, doesn't contribute to cardiovascular disease. It's more probably the oxidation of the fats and everything else that goes with it, not the actual saturated fat itself. And I want to clear this up for listeners. That doesn't mean that you go out and eat fried McDonald's and stuff. That's when you're adulterating the fat and it becomes oxidized. That is an issue. We're talking about saturated fat in things like lard and butter and animal products, where it is a still whole nutrient dense in its natural form. But what happens is we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we say you shouldn't eat these fatty foods because they're bad for you. Yes, fried foods and deep fried chips and all of that stuff, which is oxidized, hydrogenated fatty fats, they are bad for you. But fatty acids as a standalone in fish, meat products, eggs, full creamed dairy and things like that, which we don't recommend if you've got kidney disease for other reasons because it's pro-inflammatory. But the fat in it by itself isn't an issue when it's in its, and I think it's common sense, right? It's a natural form. It's been unadulterated. It's not chemicalized. The body understands what that is. It can work with it. It's when we, again, we just make things that shouldn't be complicated.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it is a mindset shift for a lot of people who, have just been told the same thing over and over, and like it's still being sold in the grocery stores. And so you're just like, well, shouldn't these be, safe? But, that's, everyone has, options to choose. And I feel like as you get better information, you're able to make a better choice for yourself. And so that's what we do when we work one-on-one with clients. We have them track their intake. And so we're able to take a look and say, okay, so it looks like, you've done a really fantastic job of hitting your protein goal, but we're still overall too low in calories. And it's really hard to get enough nutrients, not just fat. It's hard to get enough nutrients at all if you're not eating enough. And so we talk about, adding an avocado to your smoothie, or having some avocado toast as a snack, or we talk about, adding olive oil to your vegetables, or using coconut oil to roast your vegetables. Roasted vegetables, I feel like, are a secret weapon of making vegetables taste so much more interesting, right?
Oh, have you ever, like what I do, Brussels sprouts and cut them in and then dip them in coconut oil and put them in the oven? You can even put some good quality nitrate-free bacon sprinkled over the top.
That's how I do it. Yes.
Well, and Brussels sprouts suddenly become, everyone's like, what? They taste this good? I'm like, yeah, they do. If you know how to do them, they're delicious.
Yeah, I was so anti-Brussels sprouts until I tried them roasted with that nitrate-free bacon and some balsamic vinegar. And then I was like, these are the most delicious vegetables I have ever eaten. And like I think that's part of the thing, is that, people are just like so sad about vegetables, and it's because they've been told they have to eat them without any type of flavor or fat their whole lives. And vegetables are delicious when you add that extra fat to them, and you're going to absorb those nutrients so much better. So it's a win-win.
Exactly. No, I'm with you. And if I'm stir-frying vegetables, like after I've stir-fried them, taken them out, I'm water frying them, the amount of olive oil that goes over the top of them with herbs and spices to give them flavor, and they're delicious. And like you say, I've got my healthy olive oil in there. The studies with olive oil in the Mediterranean diet, and you look at, that and how it lowers cardiovascular disease and what it does for heart health. And of course, then my vegetables are delicious because they're swimming around in good quality olive oil, and yum.
Yeah, I think, again, that's the key is, we talked about earlier about no one wanting to stay on a diet where they're not satisfied and not full. Like, if we want, to help people make this a positive lifestyle change so they can see that lasting benefit, then it's gotta be something that tastes good. That's definitely one of the things we believe in at the Kidney Nutrition Institute, is livable, lovable nutrition. Like, it should taste good. Like, food should taste delicious. And that's one of the things. So we're always talking about opportunities to add in those healthy anti-inflammatory fats so that your body can get what it needs and your taste buds are happy, like you're satisfied, you're full. So
all the things
it's important.
So to wrap it all up, then what I'm hearing is fats are important. They help us feel satisfied. They're really highly anti-inflammatory. We need that for kidney function health. We need it for cardiovascular disease health. They're going to make things taste better. Sorry, my dog has lost his Kong under the thing. He's crying away like a baby. No. And, we need all of that. And it'll make we absorb more nutrients. We're going to have better hair, skin, all of that sort of stuff. Is there anything else that you want to add about essential fatty acids that we haven't talked about, why they're so important, and why we should definitely include them in our diets?
I think just underlining again that making sure you have adequate fat, that is going to make a low protein diet or a very low protein diet actually effective. Because those type of diets for kidney disease are very popular right now. But if you don't eat enough fat, then you are not going to get the benefits of the low protein diet. You're going to have all the negative side effects, which is obviously not what people are going for. They're highly motivated trying to do this on their own. So you have to, I just underline that the healthy kidney diet is not about restriction and punishing your body. It's about nourishing your body and giving it what it needs to heal and repair and function. Give it a chance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, because I don't know why people tend to throw fats and proteins sort of in the same category. It's like we're taking protein out and people think, well, that's all my animal stuff, so that automatically means fat comes out. And it's like, no, if you're going to take protein out, then fat needs to go up. So
yeah, and you will have to make that effort to add a little bit more fat in, because we don't always think about how much fat animal products carry with them. So if you're having to do a lower or very low protein diet, then you're going to have to make a concentrated effort to add fat back in.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Thanks, Lindsey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you as we're mentioning, like sometimes it's best not to do this alone. The team at Kidney Nutritional Institute are there to help. You've got experts like Lindsey. If you want to get in contact with her, I'll put the details below, but it's kidneynutritionalinstitute.org. They've got a whole team of renal dietitians who can work with you no matter where you are in the world, because they all do Zoom and things like that. And of course, they're on the forefront when it comes to the latest research and not behind in some of the stuff that Lindsey and I scratch our heads about. But we won't get into that. Lindsey, thank you again for joining me. Remember to make sure you hit subscribe and like to this video. That means that you'll get notified anytime we put up a new video. If you have any specific content that you want us to produce, Lindsey is an absolute brainiac. If you want us to go down the full-on rabbit holes, she's your girl. So let us know if there's anything you particularly want to ask Lindsey, and I'll make sure that we do a podcast on it. Lindsey, I always value your time, your brains, and you and I love to get on our soapbox before and after these things and complain about what's happening in the world of renal dietitian and diet. So again, thank you for your brain and knowledge. And again, thanks for your time and sharing your wisdom about fats and why you do need them if you've got chronic kidney disease and how to put them in. We might even, like you said, easiest ways is olive oil and avocado and maybe some oily fish and maybe taking a supplement as well. So, but you can always talk to a renal dietitian about the specifics of it. So thanks again. And thanks for being part of our community. We hope you found this useful. Until next time, bye.
Bye.